Ukraine sits today on a razor's edge, not just between war and peace, but between democracy and disorder. And while hopes for a ceasefire flicker faintly in the air, they do so under the long shadows of Putin's imperial nostalgia and Trump's transactional bullying, which he calls foreign policy. And according to The Economist, Zelensky has asked his team to begin preparing for elections this summer, pending a ceasefire. The most optimistic US voices suggest one could be reached by April's end, with campaigning to begin after martial law is lifted. But behind this procedural optimism lies a complex and perilous reality, because Putin is literally demanding that an election precedes a ceasefire, an election where civilians are gathered and then targeted by Putin. Putin has shown absolutely that what he most likes to attack is civilians. For Zelensky, therefore, elections are a poisoned chalice. On the one hand, holding a democratic vote is a show of legitimacy, something Putin has always tried to deny him. On the other, it's a logistical and moral quagmire. Millions displaced, cities bombarded, voter rolls incomplete, occupied territories beyond reach. And yet Putin jeers that Zelensky is a dictator for delaying elections. This from a man who has been 20-odd years in a job that he's never for which he's never stood for a demonstrably fair election at any point. Trump echoes the same accusation, publicly declaring Zelensky weak and privately engaging his political opponents, including Poroshenko and Tymoshenko, about accelerating elections. This isn't about democracy. This is about destabilization. This is about Putin putting out a trope, putting out propaganda that somehow this man behind the Resolute desk in an ill-fitting wig is mouthing like a muppet with somebody's hand manipulating his mouth. Elections under such conditions would not unite the country. They would risk tearing it apart. A rush to a compromise ballot imperils civilians, fuels internal division, serves as a proper coup for Moscow. And meanwhile, Trump's interest in Ukraine isn't rooted in democracy, but in minerals. He's floated a crude quid pro quo, rare earth minerals in exchange for military aid, not security guarantees, not NATO membership, just a deal, an economic one, transactional, exploitative. And here we see the broader danger of Trump's chaos. He's not merely erratic, he is systematically dismantling the Truman Doctrine, the post-1945 consensus that America would stand with democracies under threat. His demands signal to the world that smaller nations must barter sovereignty for support, that might makes right, that alliances are only as good as the latest deal. Trump may promise a ceasefire, but what he actually proposes is not peace, it's paralysis. A freezing of conflict along current lines, ceding occupied territories to Russia with no recognition of the ideological stakes at play. For Russia, this war is not primarily about land. It's always been about identity. Putin believes Ukraine is not a country but a rebellious province filled with neo-Nazis. There's only one group of Nazis, and that's the Wagner Brigade, parading their insignia, parading their name, the musician that Hitler liked. I mean, there's nothing wrong with Wagner. I think Wagner's magnificent. But nevertheless, the associations. And Russian soldiers are not just seizing buildings, they're burning Ukrainian books, they're rewriting school curricula, they're toppling statues of Ukrainian heroes. The Kremlin's goal is not military victory, but cultural erasure. And any peace plan that fails to address this will ultimately fail itself. Ceasefires that legitimize occupation only buy Russia time to regroup. Security guarantees that don't tackle ideological aggression are fig leaves on a corpse. The last time Putin offered a ceasefire and a free road for Ukrainians to travel was in Bucha. And he gunned them all down when they started using that free road. What's to be done? First, the West must insist that Russia treats Ukraine as a legitimate sovereign nation, not as a puppet, not as a brother, not as anything other than a peer. Any negotiation must place Kyiv at the centre, not behind the scenes or under UN-mapped transition, as Putin so cynically suggests. Second, peace must not come at the cost of Ukraine's identity. No impositions on language, no concessions to denazify rhetoric, which is simply a code for Russification. Ukraine must retain its cultural autonomy as a precondition of any truce. Third, the ideological war must be met on ideological terms. The West must begin promoting a shift inside Russia, not through tanks but through terms. The lifting of sanctions, the reintroduction of trade, and any diplomatic normalization must be conditional on the end of anti-Ukrainian propaganda in Russian media and education. If Russian schoolchildren continue to learn that Ukraine is an invention, the Kremlin's next invasion will be not a matter of if, but when. And finally, Europe must prepare for a world in which the United States is no longer the automatic guarantor of security. Trump has done away with that. Trump has made that much clear. Article 5 of NATO is no longer a sacred promise, it's a bargaining chip. European defence must be Europeanised with serious investment, political will and industrial capacity to match. As in 1947 the world is pivoting, but unlike the Truman Doctrine, which rallied the West in defence of democracy, we are now confronted with the erosion of that very consensus from within. If Ukraine falls, not only militarily, but culturally, demographically, democratically, ideologically, it will not be the end of Europe, it will be the end of Europe as we have known it, the end of peace, the end of a united community, a united continent, the end of freedom. We shouldn't confuse a ceasefire with peace. We shouldn't confuse deals with justice. We shouldn't confuse Putin with anything other than evil. Putin and evil must be established. At the moment, there may be some small difference between the two, but it's moderate. And we are in danger. We are in danger of thinking that there is significant difference between Trump and Putin. There's only the difference in their location, I fear, because both are dangerous.